Okay, so Death of a Game, Legends of Runeterra. That's right.
To show up on the gaming scene and not pull any punches. Their efforts into different genres have generally been met with success, and that comes from a large pre-existing fan base and a dedication to bringing their League of Legends feel to another game and genre, both monetarily and time-wise. Riot Games has seen major success with Valorant, a title that leverages the existing Counter-Strike audience and hero shooter audience and mixes them together, making the studio, at the bare minimum now, a two titans.
Honestly, orang bilang tuh kayak Valo. Quick break about Valo ya. Orang bilang kayak Valo, oh is this a Counter-Strike clone? Tapi honestly menurut gua, Riot tuh beneran made an experiment. Mereka pengen gabungin kayak hero shooter kayak contohnya Overwatch and things like that, dan coba masukin ke tactical shooter kayak CSGO. Dan menurut gue that's like actually a fresh game. Jadi Valorant shout out to Riot karena menurut gue ada inovasinya gitu, bukan cuma plek-ketiplek ngikutin Counter Strike. So yeah, anyways, Legends of Runeterra, back to it.
Studio. But there have been more attempts, some cancelled, some that never saw the light of day, and even a lesser known but still has seen its share of success regardless card game, Legends of Runeterra. Legends of Runeterra was developed by a major team pulling out all of the stops. After 3 years of development, Legends of Runeterra would launch on PC and mobile platforms, April 29th, 2020, with crossplay enabled. While Legends of Runeterra would see fast early success, LOR would prove to be Riot's most challenging game yet, providing new balance challenges, a different approach to monetization than typical, and struggling to match the success of their previous game LOL or Valorant. Despite being received well critically and by fans who lauded the game's free-to-play friendliness.
Yeah, by the way ini ya, remember, ini the game failed itu bukan gara-gara gamenya sucks, okay? Y'all gotta realize Legends of Runeterra itu mungkin the best available card game on the market sekarang. Like menurut gua sih, ya honestly nggak tahu kalau secara anime card games gua nggak tahu ya. Tapi kalau secara original card game, kayak menurut gua dia ngalahin Hearthstone. Jadi sebenarnya community-nya tuh seneng banget sama LOR dan bahkan critics kayak tadi dia bilang juga enjoy banget sama LOR, but ya tetap bisa mati gitu.
And ability to play without paying.
Also, it's like very free to play friendly ya. Jauh lebih mudah buat lu dapetin kartu dibandingin Hearthstone.
Legends of Runeterra in just 4 years would be announced to be put into maintenance mode in a shocking development. What went wrong with Riot Games' foray into the world of digital card games, or CCGs? And why did a studio known for being able to capture working ideas and make them popular and financially successful struggle to make their card game anything more than a reported money sink, or it spent more money than it made? On this episode of Death of a Game, for the first time ever, we are covering a Riot game. We cover dead and dying games and companies in this series, specifically titles that have been abandoned or shifted into maintenance mode, like Legends of Runeterra. The key is utilizing a timeline of events to find clues and bits of evidence that will help us determine why a game ended up dying or is on the path towards that. This all culminates in a final deduction where we solve the case for good, before getting to work on the next case, as time doesn't wait for anyone. Without delaying further, we need to tell another important case in the world of card games. So draw your cards or mulligan the ones you don't like, and make sure to choose a champion and region that fits your approach. Because we have a case to solve, detectives, and one that takes some belief in the heart of the cards. I think I'm always gonna make that meme. The story begins with the beginning of the development of Legends of Runeterra sometime in 2017, according to Riot themselves. Riot executives were big fans of Magic the Gathering, as were many top League players as well. Andrew Yip, also known as Riot Umbridge, known for his work on League of Legends with the Shyvana champion, alongside producer Jeff Jew, famously known as none other than Riot Cassidon, who was one of the original employees for Riot, would express interest in creating a Riot card game due to their aforementioned love of MTG and card games. To assist in this process, Riot would enlist in the help of former MTG pros attempting to develop a new card game, and meta was going to be challenging, especially if the game wasn't like the games that would come before it and was intending to innovate. So it was a good idea going to experienced developers and players. One of the pros that they ended up enlisting in the help with the most, Steve Rubin, would actually return, this time as a part of the development team permanently for the upcoming League of Legends adjacent card game. Dubbed Legends of Runeterra and announced publicly October 2019, lore was set to be different from the very start by calling into question the other classic aspects.
Honestly, iya. Dia tuh gameplaynya juga beda banget, and I think it's really cool. Kayak pakai per turn gini. Dan I was so excited, gue masih inget banget pas di announce, I was so excited karena back then gue lagi beneran suka banget sama card games, so
specs of CCGs. Remember, CCGs aren't the same as a TCG. A TCG is a trading card game, CCG is the collectible card game. In TCGs, you retain the value of your card and thus own it. In CCGs, it's merely a collection. Likely conscious of this divide and issue, Riot Games from the jump would announce to be bucking this trend entirely by stating they would not be relying on booster packs or loot boxes to give their players their cards. Instead, Legends of Runeterra would not have card packs. Instead, you would simply spend money on the cards that you wanted directly through the wild cards feature.
Nah, jadi this is why it's like way easier for you buat dapat kartu yang lu mau gitu. Especially as a free-to-play player ya.
While still getting random card rewards as you played through the game. This would essentially make LOR one of the first consumer-first CCGs. Accessibility was the key to Legends of Runeterra's formula, sort of like League of Legends, both in gameplay and in monetization. And we will talk more about that with gameplay later, however. Riot Steve Rubin was leading the charge publicly, but the LOR team had some other high-profile and impactful developers too, such as the already mentioned Andrew Yip, and of course Riot Kassadin, but also Riot Yeg, Riot G Major, Dave Guskin, a former developer on MTG the card game itself, and veterans like Jeff Seamster, Greg Kim, and Brian Koplik. Full of veterans and passion, LOR's development team was over 100 developers.
Running breaks your joints.
I old man. AI old man, by the way, what is this ad, bruh?
And working on creating fully unique art for their existing world and characters, but in their new game.
Honestly, artnya tuh keren banget, man. In Legends of Runeterra tuh, it's way cooler.
Developers
Nih, lihat
and
nih.
working on creating fully
Like, look at Nidalee. Ini Nidalee in League of Legends ya. And then guess what they did pas waktunya Nidalee pindah ke Legends of Runeterra.
art for their existing world
Look at this. They made her into this. Keren
and
banget.
characters, but in their new
Like even in Legends of Runeterra, lore-nya tuh bagus, animationsnya bagus, charactersnya is way bagus. Like I don't know, man, it's sayang banget bisa mati.
game. That would mean that legacy art would be featured in LOR, and completely new art would be featured with a new direction being attempted. This would probably be the bulk of time and money spent on the game, as card games mechanically can be complex, but actually have quite simple rules. Within a month, there were major previews happening for Legends of Runeterra. Polygon was saying that the game was too good to ignore, even if you weren't a League fan, which was quite the compliment. Information would come out concerning the focus of the card game, which was taking champions from LOL and making them the centerpiece feature here. Drawing comparisons from Planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering, or more aptly in my opinion, Commanders from the Commander format in MTG. Andrew Yip talked about LOR being champion forward due to League. While this makes sense, I think there was going to be something interesting to investigate there later, detectives. LOR was looking visually appealing, and the art was League and IP, but totally different in approach. But there were some worrying signs even early on that LOR wasn't exactly current as a card game, with the lack of animated cards, except on champion cards, and even then, those were fairly limited. Now this might be arguable to some, but the issue that I have is that MTG Arena and Hearthstone both have animated cards, or at least like the super rare versions that actually look kind of good. But like, look at Gwent. Gwent has fully animated rares, which made them look really awesome. Not
Yo, Gwent is kind of crazy, by the way. I love Gwent. Go to main Gwent gara-gara Witcher 3. But anyways, back.
having this in-game would lower your ability to make money, and would be yet another thing that people would compare your game with in these other games. Riot Games, in personally a shocking turn of events to me, would announce their open beta for their
Kayaknya gue waktu itu ikut open beta juga deh. As I remember ya. Or am I tripping? I don't know, it's been 5 years. It's been a decade. Damn, man. Udah, this is even before COVID, by the way. Gila, I'm old. I was like 18 at the time. Gue masih SMA, bro.
card game January 2020 with the explicit ability to retain the progress after playing it. This might seem like a cool and helpful gesture to those who would test the game, but it would actually turn out that they were planning to fully launch the game just a mere 3 months later. 3 months was barely enough time to be able to work on the feedback that you were going to be receiving from the open beta, which, by the way, was going to be running in parallel at the time. You just wouldn't have enough time to work on the feedback. This was worrying because, well, if LOR didn't properly modulate for progression as a free-to-play game, if they would mess that up, it would be severely difficult to undo it. Almost impossible, because you are essentially asking your audience after the fact, hey, can we make money now? More on that later too. But the point being really that LOR launching fast might have seemed like a great guerrilla marketing strategy from Riot Games because they did it before, right? With Valorant and even Apex Legends with Respawn, but that approach isn't always the best. For starters, those are shooters. They're far simpler and easier to understand. Second, those games have much easier to understand and utilize monetization plans, and thus are less risky. Riot being focused on making a value first, or consumer first, as I said, CCG was admirable, but there were some serious concerns even early on for me, if they were going to be able to turn that
Ya, jadi sebenarnya awalnya sama kayak Vainglory sih. Mereka tuh terlalu community first, which is good, tapi maksudnya kayak jadi secara longevity-nya nggak sustainable gitu. Mereka belum terlalu mikirin kayak how do we make money, you know? So yeah, sama kayak Vainglory honestly, terlalu baik.
into a financially competitive idea, and thus multiplayer game. Legends of Runeterra, Riot Games' third major game, because for some reason they don't count Teamfight Tactics, would launch on PC and Android and iOS mobile devices simultaneously, April 29th, 2024 globally. Developed utilizing the Unity engine, LOR was able to be played cross-platform as well.
Wait, 2024? Release 2024? Are you trolling? I think it's 2021. 2020. Kok 2024? Salah deh
With
kayaknya.
over 400 cards and 35 champions, Legends of Runeterra wasn't messing about. They had a major trailer and cinematic push at the same time of their launch, but although I think that their promotion material is pretty good and it seemed like most people enjoyed it, fans of League of Legends in general and at large didn't seem to know that the game existed. And that would start kind of from the very beginning. Teamfight Tactics, which is not recognized as a full game like I said, is still incredibly successful, in spite of that, and has seen much better integration with League of Legends, especially in modern times. But that's probably because the games have a lot more crossover too. It took Riot nearly 3 years to add a League of Legends Runeterra button in the League client, and that shit was tiny. And sadly, it doesn't even work as of 2025 anymore. Let's get to the reviews of the game.
Menurut gua masalahnya kalau bandingin TFT sama Legends of Runeterra ya, kenapa pemain League of Legends lebih suka main TFT dibandingin Legends of Runeterra? Pertama yaitu kayak yang tadi dia bilang, karena TFT kan satu klien, right? Sama League of Legends, lu main League of Legends normal atau ranked sama TFT itu lu di satu klien. Legends of Runeterra itu kliennya beda. Gitu. It's a different game altogether juga gitu. Dan Teamfight Tactics itu bisa dipakai sebagai game santai. Kalau lu bandingin sama Legends of Runeterra gitu. Sebagai orang awam, lu main Teamfight Tactics, misalnya lu nunggu lu ke ban 5 menit karena lu nggak accept di League of Legends, lu bisa main TFT satu match, itu full, lu bisa main full fun karena lu nggak harus unlock apa-apa. Even as a free player. Tapi kalau Legends of Runeterra, not only is clientnya beda, gak semua orang suka card games, by the way. Card games mungkin for some people is a little bit harder. Dan pun sebagai orang new player, lu harus collect kartunya dulu, dan that's gonna take a while. Jadi menurut gua itu sih kenapa TFT itu lebih acceptable bagi player base League of Legends. Jadi banyakan yang gua ketemu juga orang yang main Legends of Runeterra itu bukan orang yang main League of Legends. Kebanyakan orang yang mereka biasanya main card game lain terus cobain card game Legends of Runeterra gitu. Tapi mereka sendiri nggak pernah main LoL atau TFT gitu. So ya menurut gue gitu sih.
Was to add a League of Legends Runeterra button in the League client, and that shit was tiny of the game. Metacritic's reception was positive for Legends of Runeterra, but the game was barely covered by comparison to other card games like Artifact, Hearthstone, or even Yu-Gi-Oh! More recently, having only 12 major reviews. The game scored a B+, and from major outlets like IGN, scored even higher at a 9 out of 10. IGN was glowing, or glazing, in their review of the game, where they would dub LOR a whole new breed of CCG, going even further than that to state that the game represented a high new watermark for digital card games. The voice work was detailed, and nearly every card game and interaction had voice acting.
We shall not rest until all betrayers are dead.
Ya voice actingnya juga bagus sih. Like sesuai dengan lore-nya, jadi ceritanya juga keren.
Okay, but let's dive into things ourselves, especially since there wasn't that much of a reception, as we do sometimes when there just isn't enough coverage, or I get the feeling or smell that something's fishy. What's unique about Legends of Runeterra? Well, starting with the monetization, as you probably already know, the game allows you to purchase wild cards to get the rare cards that you want outright, without needing to open booster packs or chests and buy them with money. This makes it an incredibly approachable game, especially since it's free to play. But there were some cracks there, though we will get more to those later, as I keep teasing, as I really want to dig into the gameplay of Legends of Runeterra first, since there's a lot to tackle, which was also unique. The gameplay in Legends of Runeterra was somewhere between Gwent and Magic the Gathering Arena, which is the digital companion to Magic the Gathering, the card game. I know this sounds like a bit of a strange comparison, but bear with me. Starters, the game lacks a lot of RNG in it. Now this might sound like a plus for some players, and I understand that, as it was in Gwent, but I want to highlight both the positives and negatives of the design. Lack of RNG makes the game played out more deliberately, and thus leading to less frustrating experiences, more of a figured out game, and thus less of those kind of like, oh my god, I can't believe it's Hearthstone moments. This was the same issue that Gwent had as the CCG, where people would describe the game as only being customizable decision-wise the first 5 rounds. But that's where LOR was headed as well. Each player had a nexus with 20 HP that must be destroyed for a victory, kind of like League of Legends, right? And champions are, as we already discussed, a major part of the game, which served as like hero units with the ability to level up and gain new powers and abilities, and influence the other monster cards or followers as they are dubbed. Kind of like a planeswalker. With the combination of champions and their followers, players must attempt to dominate the board until they can rush their opponent's nexus. But don't fret. There are spell cards too that vary based on the speed of their cast, but can assist you in the control of the board. Champions and followers, instead of having colors or monster types, like in Hearthstone or MTG, would instead have regions that they would call home, and not really focus on the monster type stuff. These regions would have different champions and followers and approaches to combat, and even doubly so, since neutral cards didn't even exist in the game, you could combine up to 2 different regions in your deck, making it way customized.
Ya dulu ini pas belum ada Runeterra cards ya, maksudnya neutral cards sih. Jadi dulu tuh, that's what I really like about lore juga, kayak very fresh the concept. It's not like any other card game. Beneran pakai regions yang itu pun masuk dengan lore-nya gitu loh.
Players start the game by choosing their hand amongst 4 cards and with the ability to mulligan specific cards, which was actually a nice touch. You then gain mana over time, but actually have the ability to bank the mana. Players then draw 1 card per round from a deck of 40 overall, and take turns on who is on attack or defense. Now this should sound familiar to MTG players, but it's actually kind of rare amongst CCGs. You stack the board with monsters or bide your time to do such, and press your opponent. It's almost like a played out brawl where the cards just come and go and come and go and come and go, and that's kind of the intention. Your opponent can then choose which defenders they want to defend while you're on your attacking spree, allowing the combat to then be resolved. Health is also not regenerated, much like in MTG. The issues with design in LOR are that despite having deck types that are common in card games, such as control, aggro decks, and etc., due to having auto-generated land and lacking the deeper strategic focus, is that these played out in LOR without that much variety. The variety was simply the deck type, and that removed a mountain of complexity in the game, which means that the game can play out almost exactly the same sometimes, which makes for a very poor competitive game and not a very fun game to watch. This would give the game less longevity and make it not as exciting to the streamer and YouTube audience. Legend
Honestly true. Ya, bener sih. Kayak jadi nggak ada banyak variety. I agree.
would give the game less longevity and make it not as exciting to the streamer and YouTube audience. Legends of Runeterra felt like it was designed to be a feel-good game, both gameplay and monetization-wise, and it probably succeeded at that, but from a gameplay perspective, that meant less complexity. More 1-2-3 punch combo focuses for simpler exchanges on the stack, and less of an ability to utilize neutral cards for strategic depth, since that greatly would complicate the game. And from the monetization's perspective, that meant that you were easily able to get the cards and decks that you needed, without needing to spend money, which sounds great. Problem being, that was actually a crucial point and focus of card games in general, and CCGs in particular. What I mean is that I'm going to get hate from people who don't understand what I'm trying to say, but CCGs and TCGs need monetization, and that's in your face, because it gives the cards values, and cards have value in a card game, especially
Yeah, true. Kayak contohnya Pokemon aja, right? Pokemon is a TCG, not a CCG. Tapi maksudnya you need the value, you need the economy. Atau enggak it's just gonna be like that, you know? How do I explain it ya? Mungkin he explains better here. Coba kita dengerin.
trading card game. It's crucial, right? This means that if there's no economy in your card game, or the economy doesn't allow for higher end participants to stack the paper with rare skins and more cards, it means that you create this almost socialistic, everyone is equal economy, where now people don't have to earn anything and don't have a desire to be put on pathways towards more unlockables anyway, because everyone gets them. So that
Yes, gitu. Jadi it's really important for economies to do that. Kayak bahkan in real life ya. Maksudnya kayak misalnya nih Pokemon, right? If Pokemon harga semua kartunya ya gitu-gitu aja, right? Then it will be way different gitu loh. Like as he said tadi, orang tuh jadi nggak bergairah untuk like try out new things, collect new cards and things like that. Jadi you really need that. You really need like the expensive cards. You need the rare cards. Itu dibutuhin banget. Karena kalau semua orang have if everyone have every cards, gue ngomong apa baru? If semua orang tuh udah gampang mendapatkan semua kartu, mereka bakal lebih gampang bosen juga gitu. Jadi monetization-nya juga akan lebih mati.
Economy, where now people don't have to earn anything and don't have a desire to be put on pathways towards more unlockables anyway because everyone gets them. Suddenly, players don't care about playing draft mode and going on long runs, a famous part of all card games, especially CCGs, or adding more super rares to their collection since they already have them all. Worse, in LOR, there is no real way for the game to make money. Expansions were set to be free, and cosmetics were limited when compared to other card games like Hearthstone and Gwent. There wasn't really a good and reliable way to keep spending money on Legends of Runeterra, even if you wanted to. It's one of the few games that I've heard people actually tell me, it's like that Fry meme, take my money, damn it. And while this sounds cute, and we can certainly pat Riot Games on the back for it, their bills weren't going to kumbaya with rainbows over their inability to make money, especially.
Ya, jadi simpelnya kayak gini. Secara monetisasi Legends of Runeterra failnya karena bayangin nih, lu gampang, right, dapat semua kartu, right, gampang banget untuk dapetin semua kartu. Bayangin, misalnya semua orang udah punya semua kartu, right, dan lu udah cobain semua meta decks-nya, lu udah cobain semua archetypes-nya, lu bakal lebih gampang bosen gitu. Misalnya lu bosen, right, lu udah main misalnya like 3 months, 3 bulan lu udah mainin semua kartu karena lu udah punya semuanya, lu tunggu next expansion, right? Next expansion sama gampang banget buat dapetin semua kartunya karena lu udah kumpulin semua resource-nya sebelum expansion itu keluar. Lu craft semua kartu, lu main lagi paling cuma 3 bulan udah. Jadi akhirnya mereka cepet bosen, tapi monetisasinya juga mati. Mereka nggak masuk duit gitu ke Riot, right? Beda kalau misalnya like I'm talking about Pokemon, right? Pokemon orang tuh spending like millions of dollars just to buy packs, just to get a chance at dapetin kartu yang rare gitu, right? Dan itu pun nanti masuk ekonominya, orang pada trading and things like that, right? Jadi orang tuh main karena mereka kayak oke, gue pengen dapet duit supaya gue bisa upgrade deck gue nih gitu. Tapi kalau di Legends of Runeterra nggak ada feel itu, jadi duit yang masuk juga kecil banget.
When they were pouring so much money into the game. Whereas, like I said before, it's not like Riot Games could suddenly fix their monetization issues without creating a massive backlash of betrayal. Hint, hint, they were in a fast burn situation.
Also ini juga buat orang yang bilang, tapi kan mereka ada skin. Dulu tuh mereka belum ada skin sama sekali. Seinget gue ya, ada sih tapi nggak seramai sekarang kan di Legends of Runeterra. Jadi beneran it's like super free dan lu paling kosmetiknya cuman board sama yang body yang sebelah kirinya tuh, yang ini nih poronya. Cuman itu doang dan itu pun nggak semua orang pasti beli gitu.
Massive backlash of betrayal. Hint, hint. They were in a fast burn situation where they couldn't outrun how much money they were spending, and their only way was trying to smash through everything with massive success. But the level of expectations and financial burden being placed on Legends of Runeterra from their proxy developer Riot Games and everyone around it was immense. The first core set release would happen in the fall of 2020 and would introduce 51 new cards and 5 new champions and multiple new mechanics, with the introduction of Freljord, Ionia, Shadow Isle regions, and subsequent cards and, well, the champions that come with them. This set was divided into 5 separate
Diabetes.
Coronary disease.
Autoimmune
Skip.
expansions released over the course of weeks. The advertisement put into these trailers, there was a lot of it, but there didn't seem to be much media crossover for Legends of Runeterra. Call of the Mountain was a serious effort from Runeterra, but even then you could start to see that it wasn't having the most effect on getting other players to try the game out. And well, you can also see in the early expansions that there was a lot of development going into these expansions, just based on how many people were involved in the development. Empires of the Ascended would add new cards and new favorites, this time centering the expansion around none other than Shurima and the champions that are associated with it, which were some favorites. It's strange though. The marketing style is there, the ideas are there, but it's like LOR even just early on felt like it was missing something. Whether it be the fact that the game didn't have a single player mode that it could advertise, despite all this story focus that they were advertising, or whatever marketing was being done for the game just wasn't resonating with people. The problem is this only would worsen over time as it does in most CCGs, as the burden to entry becomes just harder and harder. But at least with LOR, that wouldn't be that much of a
Itu ya, burden to entry ya with CCGs. Kenapa? Karena orang yang main lebih lama dari lu pasti akan lebih jago dari lu. Not only secara skill ya, tapi maksudnya karena mereka punya kartu-kartu yang OP gitu. Jadi sebagai new player, unless lu beneran berani keluar duit sebanyak itu, lu pasti akan selalu kalah dengan deck yang meta gitu. Beda sama League of Legends, right? Misal, lu pemain baru, lu punya beberapa champion doang, itu pun kalau misalnya skill lu oke, lu masih bisa kalahin misalnya hero-hero yang meta, champion yang meta gitu. Tapi kalau di CCG kayak LOR itu susah banget.
an issue. However, as people were spending more time buying cards in their own CCG or TCG of choice, there were probably less chances they would return to LOR. Even if the expansions were impressive, and if they would return, they would probably only return long enough to get the cards they wanted, and then dip out after getting bored.
Yes, itu. Jadi itu yang gue rasain juga. Jadi pas setiap kali new expansion kan pasti ada kayak beberapa champion yang release new sets whatever. Tapi karena gue tahu sebagai free to play player pasti gue udah kalah sama orang yang udah lebih lama main, sama gue nggak mau keluarin duit. Jadi paling gue cuman save up ya buat craft secara free satu kartu champion. Kayak misalnya pas Jarvan keluar, gue craft Jarvan or something like that. Terus udah gue main pakai deck Jarvan full for like 2 months. Abis itu bosan, udah selesai. Gue nggak coba dapetin kartu yang lain karena it's gonna be way too hard. Dan karena di ranked pun gue udah pasti ketemu orang-orangnya yang decknya yang meta gitu. Jadi udah pasti gue kalah gitu.
Sort of how with Virtual Worlds expansions do little to attract new players in the same way that new player-focused efforts do. This is the thing with CCGs and TCGs especially. These games have massive audiences for sure, but they are a mixture of old and loyal players and then the constant influx of like new and maybe younger players. And think about it, joining MTG or Pokemon's not just about playing those card games, but joining those ecosystems, those economies, and those worlds. MTG has tons of collecting aspects, winnable cards and booster packs, and a built-in community system with stores having what people would call locals, that are tournaments or venues that host local tournaments for local players. The same would apply to Pokemon, with even more focus put on collecting and joining the complete world of the IP with the games and anime and more. LOR didn't have much of an economy and had nearly no story that wasn't just readable or listenable. Sure, it might seem unfair to compare it to other TCGs, but the point is that that's what the core of a TCG is. That's what makes it a TCG. What about a CCG? They're basically like the worst value version and proposition traded for convenience, right? They give you the faster paced gameplay traded for the complexity or communal relations, since most CCGs don't allow any socialization in them at all, but that's a trade that many people seem to be okay with. But what makes Hearthstone or MTG Arena work? Well, they attack your dopamine receptors in other ways, and there are a slew of ways to motivate you to complete the quests or storylines in the game besides just having fun and adventure, like getting more cards, rare vanity, and even booster packs. Remember something that was completely lacking in LOR? With all that comes with Riot Games comes the expectation of esports, let's be honest. But that doesn't tell the whole story, and kind of makes you think that Riot Games was always this like mega esport powerhouse that spent large amounts of money. But Riot Games, in reality, with their first game, League of Legends, built the competitive scene from the ground up into a behemoth. And then after learning how, seemingly, skip the growth process with Valorant due to knowing how things worked and approaching an already well-established formula and innovating on it and creating yet another mega esport. Few know, however, that esports was also attempted with Legends of Runeterra, and that would start with the first World Championship in September of 2021, first announced in April 2021. The numbers for this were respectable. As I always like to compare these things, since it's important to know, is this actually a fad that people are just pumping money into, or an actual esport? The numbers here felt like they were something to build upon. But just because Riot Games had did it right before, and did it right twice, didn't mean that they could do it right with every single game and make every single game of theirs an esport. And as time would tell, the community would largely reject LOR as an esport despite Riot's efforts. Following their successful first World Championship, Riot would unveil another expansion, Guardians of the Ancient, which would include 3 new champions and 42 new cards. Balancing for the ever-changing meta of card games was always going to be difficult, but even more so difficult in the case of Legends of Runeterra because neutral cards didn't exist, and thus all cards had to be made from regions with unique interactions in mind. I bet a large amount of their large team was probably just spent on live PvP testing and balancing. Beyond the Bandlewood was one of the bigger expansions for the game yet, and would drop August 2021 with 120 new cards and 8 new champions spread across 2 different regions, Bandle City and Bilgewater.
Work today is broken. We're all working in too many disconnected apps, and it's killing team productivity.
The speed of the updates for LOR seemed admirable, and really they were. But underneath that surface, their ideas were too much too fast. I mean, LOR had a serious team, but with how fast they were cooking up new regions and expansions, could they resist the common slope towards burnout? And were they actually making the money for that? Remember, as we typically talk about with multiplayer games, with theme park style content, as we talk about in virtual worlds, this content can be very popular in the big mainstream sense, but only like 2 or 3 developers with boatloads of cash are able to pull it off. Live development with live content development going on at the same time is just difficult if you're not making enough money to warrant it. And worse, with all that rushing for new content, could they even make their investment back in the game and that content back itself? Remember, although the new player experience was great in LOR, it was almost too great. Or once your window of opportunity to monetize a player would expire, which was already fleeting to begin with, you effectively couldn't monetize them anymore. While for the first year of development, Legends of Runeterra launched without a single player mode, making it non-competitive with most CCGs, they would actually get one, though in limited fashion at first with the Path of Champions. Path of Champions was like a roguelite at its core, not really allowing for deck customization that you could do in most Hearthstone-like single-player encounters, but instead allowing you to play the encounters differently based on how you wanted to, with customization options that would pop up through the quest line, which were also
Menurut gua Path of Champions is like the best thing they did. Bagus banget sih.
unique for each champion. This allowed for more replayability, because although you could make your deck in Hearthstone, maybe not being able to do that but having more random encounters could lead to that. At least that was the idea here. And Path of Champions for the first time, I think, really showed the story of League of Legends, though Arcane would drop the same month and absolutely blow.
Also, Arcane first season 2021, by the way, 4 years ago. 4 years ago. That's crazy. We're old, bro.
Up. And Riot Games would spend a boatload on Arcane too, so they had some serious money. But at some point that money can dry up, or projects are gonna have to be cold to prevent that. Sometime during the spring of 2022, the lead director on the project, and one of the founders on the idea even, Riot Umbridge, Andrew Yip, would quietly depart the project. It's hard to know why, since no reason was listed, but Andrew would kind of go dark for a number of years before ending up joining more Riot alumni with a new company dubbed Theorycraft Games sometime later in 2025. It's not out of the question to see departures on projects, but losing someone who helped basically found the project and spearhead it was always going to be a worrying sign. A few months later, according to LinkedIn, and Jeff Ju, the other part of that puzzle, would depart as well, being the second main founder on LOR and a serious force behind Riot Games itself. You can't imagine that these departures were anything but pretty for either side, and would sadly start to form a pattern going forward for Riot Games with Legends of Runeterra. I mean, when you have like founder employees leaving, which also happened with Twitch, and I know a few of those founder employees, there's always a reason for it. I think these departures must have had to do with the ever-changing direction of Legends of Runeterra, which started as a more casual-centric game and started to slowly become more competitive, especially with its World Championship. But with May 2020's expansion, World Walker, and the introduction of the Path of Champions 2.0, the game would take more of a leap into the other direction of being a roguelite mode and content, which seemed to be actually working for them. Now let's get the controversy out of the way during this release, that there would also be the release of the cash shop currency that would allow you to purchase certain characters without having to earn them by playing the game. This angered some players because they felt that although they had plenty of value in the game, they were always promised that they weren't going to have to buy characters like that. But to be fair, I mean, if this is like their whole selling point, Riot has to make money somehow.
Yeah.
But the fact that their audience is resistant to them doing that shows you that there's probably a problem in the design. You see what I'm saying? The expansion, though, would introduce 67 new cards and a few new champions, and more fleshed out progression for the Path of Champions. Quietly behind the scenes, though, would be the death of Expeditions, a personal favorite of many CCG fans, including myself. Citing low player numbers, Expeditions were essentially like Arena in Hearthstone, or Brawl in MTG, or Commander, right? Commander references. The real issue here, however, is regarding the non-existent economy. Players aren't motivated to go on runs if nothing is on the line. And so nothing was really on the line in Legends of Runeterra, let's be honest.
Expedition tuh dulu kayak Path of Champions sebelum Path of Champions ya. Hampir sama sih. Apa ya, gue bahkan sampai udah lupa. Tapi masalahnya lu nggak ada reward. The only reward that you get itu cuma an icon. Kayak lu udah pernah selesaiin Expedition sama champion ini gitu. That's it. Lu nggak dapet kartu, lu nggak dapet apa sih, inget gue ya. So there really is kayak the only reason you would replay it itu for fun doang. Jadi kalau lu nggak suka, you would not touch it dan lu nggak bakal waste your time on it. So
which essentially killed one of the largest parts of a CCG, the random arena matches and modes. Legends of Runeterra pivoting to the Path of Champions was the right move. However, their attempt at esports was anything but that, with their second World Championship having super low 12,000 peak player viewership and only 8,000 on average. While Legends of Runeterra had a prize pool that was almost half of Hearthstone's for their World Championship, the viewership, it wasn't anywhere close, it just wasn't there. It was Overwatch all over again, where Activision attempted to force that esport hand as well to very poor results. But not as poor as Legends of Runeterra, at least in terms of viewership, which is probably why you didn't even know it had a pro scene. Though OWL was way bigger of a financial failure, let's be honest. The problem with pro scenes, though, and big tournaments, as we've discussed in the series before, including with Overwatch, is that these aren't actual ecosystems being designed to make a living. That's because sports systems aren't just erected overnight, unless they have this in mind. Meanwhile, Hearthstone had like 20 plus medium to major tournaments every year at all levels of play, and even the Fireside tournament scene before they got rid of that. And of course, MTG Arena has like a million different tournament formats, though they're less of a proper tournament and more of just a pool of players. LOR didn't seem to take notes from Hearthstone or MTG Arena, and instead Riot Games chose to apply their typical approach with other esports here. However, the forcing of Legends of Runeterra as an esport wasn't a success, especially if anything, it just showcased how non-competitive the game was to everybody and how it wasn't very exciting to watch. But not even in like an entertaining way that made people want to keep watching it, like with Hearthstone, which we constantly make fun of its World Championship scenes when they're decided on complete RNG roles. But at least it's really fun to watch and there's still skill there. Instead, with Legends of Runeterra, we have just this like lukewarm steak without any seasoning. You still eat it when someone serves it to you, but you just wish that something more had been put into it. Riot Games would announce a competitive rework for Legends of Runeterra to start off 2023. And while that might sound like they were trying to make the game more competitive overall, it actually was more of an approach at making the game competitive at all levels, which was like I was talking about with MTG Arena's different.
I don't need to know the competitive scene.
Or be moved elsewhere, starting with longtime developer
Serious dictation was driving
So
I switched to whisper flow. Here's why I'll never go.
Connor Fizz and Chips Sheehy, who looking at like 7,800 peak players, which was their average number from the World Championship prior. That's also less than a BoobTube streamer on like a fat day. But the glowing reviews from Riot employees would start working on Legends of Runeterra from the beginning.
Nah, ya,
such as
ini
the lead
mulai
developer.
layoff nih. 11% of staff, 503 people. Damn. Ini pas Riot Force juga mati. Riot Force is like the single player game studio ya buat Riot yang ngebuat Nunu and Willump, game Nunu, game Echo sama game Ruin King itu semua Riot Forge, tapi mereka tutup.
Steve Rubin or the senior writer Ian St. Martin. That's just the beginning of the layoffs though. They would lay off 6 senior positions in total, 3 lead roles, and even more would be moved to other Riot Games projects. LOR was heavily targeted because Riot Games would admit that the game was just facing financial challenges due to costing more money to develop and support than the game would make. Being the feel-good CCG, monetization-wise, had made their position untenable. And just when things couldn't get worse, but always following the announcement of such a large firing, was the downsizing of the team and content promise for Legends of Runeterra going forward. Effectively, the game would be shifted to maintenance mode with a complete focus shifting to the PvE roguelite mode, Path of Champions. This meant that the game was no longer a serious PvP game and no longer a serious focus for Riot.
Ya, jadi sejak ini orang tuh beneran kayak okay, this game is dead. Karena beneran PvP udah dimatiin supportnya sama sekali, like no support at all for PvP. Jadi full mereka fokus ke PvE, ke Path of Champions. Jadi lu lawan bot aja, dan itu pun kayak mereka beneran masih cut cost, kayak animasinya dipotong and things like that. So ya, itu pas itu gue udah kayak okay, the game is dead, jadi gue udah leave. Gue nggak pernah main lagi sejak itu.
And would get little more than quality of life changes and seasonal events and some content here and there. This would mean, as we would find out a year later, no new cosmetics, no serious updates, PvP now being basically abandoned, and the new champions added to the game only being playable in Path of Champions. The card art...
Oh ya, itu juga. Jadi champion yang baru itu cuma bisa lu mainin di Path of Champions, nggak bisa di PvP. Karena beneran dioptimisasinya buat PvE doang gitu.
Was seemingly ripped from arcane screenshots and screen grabs, and the last champions added just seemed unfinished. Even if Path of Champions was reportedly the new focus, the new champions there were lacking voice work and the story content in the same way as before. It's like immediately the shifting to maintenance mode was felt, even if they were still going to be taking care of their golden goose, the Path of Champions. I think this is demonstrated even more with the newest expansion to follow the dreaded announcement, Dreamlight Paths. While not a bad expansion, it was clearly lacking in the same pizzazz as previous expansions, and virtually having no advertisement to accompany it. I can't even find any press releases about it, for example, and more of the signs being shown of a dying game, this time with reused assets, and the lack of the unique splash art that the game was famous for. The final dagger would be twisted December 6th, 2024, with the introduction of a new card game set in the Legend of Legos or League of Legends universe. This time, a TCG, aka...
Ya, akhirnya mereka buat TCG, physical one, namanya Riftbound. Dan itu pun orang udah kayak, okay, Riot udah beneran abandon, LOR beneran fokus di Riftbound kayaknya sih.
A playable trading card game. Now, we still don't know if that means that there will be any digital component to accompany it, but as it stands, and according to the early testing at Riot Studios, Project K, now officially known as Riftbound, was a TCG, and Riot's new toy. It's almost like Riot wasn't happy with how things ended with their CCG, so instead of attempting to fix it or try it again, they just made a TCG, which would later open up the ability to go digital as well. So it's not a terrible idea. And I know the fans probably hate it. I mean, you just saw Riot announce a new card game and promise to support it this time, for sure this time. And obviously that would rub people the wrong way, feeling like Riot had just abandoned their previous card game, Legends of Runeterra. I mean, read the top comments on the announcement. Riot, who had a typical history of always captivating their audience and eliciting all kinds of glaze, was being accused as an abandoner, and people were losing their faith in the apparent new card game before it ever even came out. Now, maybe that's just not the same audience, and maybe Riftbound never gets a digital component, so those fans that are mad at it aren't really as important, but I'm willing to bet that there would still be some crossover there, right? Like, even me, for example. It's hard to blame people's skepticism.
Menurut gua, terkait Legends of Runeterra sama Riftbound ya, kenapa Riot nge-abandon Legends of Runeterra dan mereka ke Riftbound? Menurut gua, this is the best decision, gitu. Legends of Runeterra mereka beneran not making any money from Legends of Runeterra. Mereka pun kalau coba save that game, malah fansnya yang lama-lama akan kecewa karena mereka nggak bisa kasih maksimal. Jadi menurut gua, what they're trying to do is Legends of Runeterra mereka bakal fix udah jadiin game roguelite aja gitu. Makanya mereka pindahin ke PvE doang, Path of Champions. Dan dari mistake yang mereka belajar dari failure-nya Legends of Runeterra, yaitu mereka nggak bisa dapat duit, monetisasinya kurang, itu mereka fix dan mereka coba ngerilis semacam Legends of Runeterra 2 yang bernama Riftbound. Tapi this time ya sebagai TCG, right? Dan mereka mulai physical dulu, siapa tahu nanti bisa di-port ke digital, right? Sebagai kayak balasan dari the mistakes that they did gitu loh di Legends of Runeterra. Jadi kayak gitu menurut gua sih. And I think that's the best possible option. Jadi buat kalian yang main Legends of Runeterra, menurut gua ya mendingan pindah ke Riftbound gitu. Legends of Runeterra biarin itu jadiin PvE game aja. Menurut gue sih gitu sih. That's the most realistic outcome and the most best outcome for the fans in the long run juga menurut gue sih. So I don't think it's bad.
Some crossover there, right? Like even me from here. Even with their announcement of a road consisted of previously teased before that show back boards for launch, mostly at...
But ya gitu sih kalau Legends of Runeterra ya.